Hello, everybody. Welcome to the channel. I would love to introduce you to my good friend and very talented artist, Robin, who has kindly agreed to give me help with painting animals because whales are hard.
Hello, nice to be here. Paint with you, I guess. I've got actually some drawing stuff in front of me, so I can.
I have my whales, but my problem is that it's a very large thing.
Yeah,
I'm painting the whales on. We're working it out.
it's going to be exciting. I'm not sure what it is, but it looks like it's going to be exciting.
Yes, it's I don't actually know if I'll have revealed what it is by the time this goes up on the channel or not. So, but let's just say it's a dress and it has whales on it.
I'm looking forward to it.
Let's start with, how long have we known each other? It's like a while now, right?
It is, yeah. It's 4 or 5 years now.
Yeah, second Regenesis, my first game.
Yeah, it's when you started LARPing, basically.
Because you've been LARPing a lot longer than I have.
Although I think these days you do far more than I do. But yeah, I started LARPing when I was at Durham University doing my postgrad. So that would be, how old am I?
I love those moments where you're just like, there's a timeline here, but...
I was probably like 22 or 23. I'm 35 now. So we're talking like 12, 13 years ago. Yeah. Gosh, that's quite a long time.
Yeah, it's a good run.
Yeah. And I still do it. I like I say, I do it a bit less these days, but still do LARP. It's fun. It's weird.
I think everyone's very well primed for LARP. It's weird, but also very fun.
Yeah, that's I think the only way you can describe it to people. Like you try and just people say, oh, "What's LARP?" and you're just like, well, I can't pretend it's not a bit weird, and I can't pretend from the outside we're utterly ridiculous. This is true. But it's a lot of fun, so it's entirely worth all the oddness.
Just don't think about what it looks like from the outside. Just be in the moment and you'll have a good time.
Yeah, nobody's watching. It's fine.
Let's talk about art.
Let's talk art then.
Yeah. Yes. So how did you get into art? Which I know is like the most nebulous question in the world.
So I was really into art when I was a kid and a teenager. I used to do a lot of mostly acrylic painting, but watercolors as well. I was really, really keen on it. I did art at GCSE, which is, for your international audience, the exams you take when you're 16 in school. It was great, but then I lost my confidence entirely because some people are really discouraging. That's basically it. Some people were really discouraging because they didn't like the art I did, and it wasn't the type of art that was suitable for GCSE to get a good grade.
Right. Yeah.
Which is really difficult because it's such a subjective thing, but it wasn't the right type. So I lost confidence and I stopped doing it for a long time. And it was only about 4 years ago that I actually started, well, I did little bits in between here and there, and every so often I'd paint and go, oh yeah, I really like doing this, and then I wouldn't do it again for another year. And I started a few years ago, I'm thinking I'd quite like to do some drawing and painting, and picked it up and just really enjoyed it and didn't stop this time, and got better and gained more confidence. I had an initial blip where it was like, oh man, I like some of the things I'm drawing look like they're drawn by a 16-year-old. And then I realized like the last time I'd properly drawn was when I was a 16-year-old. So of course there hadn't been any development in that time. And realizing that was really helpful because it's like, oh, okay, no, I can get better. I just have to do it more. So I carried on doing it.
You do a lot of different art, and I really enjoy your pictures of wind turbines. That is a personal favorite. But I'm a special case because I really like wind turbines.
Yeah, it's a niche, but I found when you find people who like wind turbines, they really like them. So that's good. I just have to find my people.
Yeah.
Because I enjoy doing them and I want to do more of them, but they're not always the things that sell. Which is, it's tricky because it's good to sell things because making money is sometimes important. Like the paint isn't free, I have to buy paint. Mm-hmm. And it's gratifying as well. And I do enjoy a lot of the stuff that I do for sale. But like in my brain, the thing which I really want is basically going, draw wind turbines, draw architecture, draw electricity pylons. Yeah, more of them. And then I'm like, or a fish, I could draw a fish. I'll draw a fish.
I'm in the middle of trying to paint a bunch of whales, and I'm mostly discovering that animals are really hard, because you also do a lot of animal art.
I do, yeah. I do really enjoy the animals. They give you so many opportunities to learn different techniques because animals are very varied. So you've got all the different textures of paint that go into it, and textures for fur and skin and scales and all that sort of thing, which is lovely. There's a really nice range of colours, and which again, it's so much fun because you can go, great, I can get to play with colour. But then you learn colour theory while you're doing that. And I'm a big colour theory nerd, and I know you are as well. So that's an exciting...
What gave it away?
So yeah, that sort of thing's nice. And then it's really helped me progress my drawing skill as well. I was really stubborn for a long time and was like, no, I'm not going to do practice sketches. I'm just going to put things straight on the page. And then at some point I did a practice sketch, and then I drew it on the final page and was like, oh, that's much better. I'm going to do that from now on. So that's helped me progress my drawing skill and go, oh, you know, like if I practice this, turns out you get better. Some lies like that.
Like, let's say you've decided you want to do an animal that you've never drawn before. What's your process for that? How do you launch into something that's new?
So the first thing I tend to do is look at lots and lots of pictures. I just do a Google image search basically for like elephant, and I find every picture I can of an elephant and I study them. I look at the shape and the colour, and I try and look and see what's common in each photograph, even when they're in different, they're not poses because the animals, but you know, when they're in different stances or you know, positions, that's the word, when they're in different positions. But there's quite often commonalities of, like, you know, an elephant, no matter which way it's facing, its bum is really high. Its bum is often higher than its head, and that's just the shape that they are. So that's something you can take away with it. And again, like studying an elephant, you're looking at it because your first instance is, I'm going to paint an elephant, I'll use grey paint. And then you start looking at them and going, no, that's kind of peach, and that one's a bit brown, and that one's got some pink in it, but that one's bluish grey around the edge. And you just start seeing all these different things and appreciating them. Then I move on to my sketchbook. I pick 2 or 3 of the positions that I think are most interesting in terms of composition or cuteness sometimes, depending on exactly what the goal is. And I will do some sketches of different, let's see if I've got some, of just them in different positions. Quite often I don't finish the sketches. I'll get halfway through and go, okay, yeah, I've got a decent idea of what shape it's supposed to be now. Or I'll get halfway through and go, okay, I got the head right, but something's gone horribly wrong with the back end. So we'll just start again with just the back end. And so if I show you,
Yes.
Yeah, so you can see like the head is done in some detail, and the rest of the body is just like a faint sketch outline.
Mm-hmm.
Just, I'm not sure I quite like this, so I abandoned it and moved on to another one. And that repetition really helps. I tend to sketch I try and block out the basic shape, and I try and mark out where I think the furthest points, the furthest dimensions are. So I'll put a little mark on the page of, okay, so if this is going to be the top of the head, then everything has to be in relation to where the top of the head is. So its back leg will therefore be down here, and its bum will be here. And then I fill in the gaps, essentially. At least I try to. That's the theory. And then I can add paint. I have discovered that most of my painting is drawing, because you spend a lot of time drawing and then you get to fill in the detail, which I really enjoy. But it's frustrating sometimes because I do just want to paint. It's worth putting in the time and the effort first.
What you say about blocking out the edges of things and figuring out where the furthest extent is going to be, I think that's really helpful advice, because if you remember my cloak that I painted for that one event,
that was stunning. Yeah, that was beautiful.
It came out really well, but I basically started drawing the head of the skeleton and didn't think about the rest of it. So there was actually in my head, it was the full skeleton on the back of the cloak. And actually we got kind of 2/3 of it because I hadn't mapped out how big everything was going to be.
Yeah.
It still looked good, but part of me is always like, but what if we had managed to get it the way that you wanted it to look?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Sometimes you do get to a point and you're like, well, I'm just going to have to make this work now. But I know it's not right. And that can be really frustrating, especially if you show it to people and people are like, oh, it's beautiful. You've just done such a good job. And you have to try and stop yourself from going, no, it's wrong.
Because other people don't know what your plan is.
I know that's similar in costume making as well.
It's one of the reasons why I really don't like telling people ahead of time what I'm planning to make, because it's going to change.
Yeah.
And that is just the way that I work with costume, is that I don't plan very far ahead. I have a general idea, and then I'll do something and go, okay, that needs a bit more, or that needs a bit less, or actually I've decided I'm not going to do this, or you ran out of time.
Which frequently happens. So no, I agree with you. Sometimes it's nice to tell people because it can give you a bit of a boost in getting started, encourage you to actually do the thing. But then it's really difficult when things go sideways, as they often do. And like, there's nothing wrong with things going sideways, but it can be really hard to try and explain to people that things have changed, that they're maybe not going to see what you'd hoped or what they'd hoped. Not that like you actually owe it to anybody, unless it's a commission, but that's a whole different. But there's still, I know that it's not uncommon to have a bit part of your brain be like, no, but I told them, so I have to do this.
Yeah. Your paintings that you do, is it mostly watercolor these days? Because I feel like most of what I've seen is watercolor.
Yeah, it's mostly watercolor. I keep having the urge to pick up my acrylics again and do something, but I haven't quite got past the word something yet. How I just want to put a canvas up and put paint on it, but I haven't figured out what shape I want that paint to look like. So I might just have to get over myself and just do that and see what happens. But I live in a really small flat, so I have to commit to that. If I'm going to do an acrylic painting, that means I have to clear my desk off and set up for acrylics, and that's going to be it for a while. I need to work up the courage and the energy to do that. There's always the thorny subject of we've developed this whole culture of turning hobbies into money-making things.
Yes.
And that's it's a big thing with art, and it's really difficult for me. I often worry that I end up coming across as really pretentious because I want to be an artist. I want to do art and have it shown. I want to have it in galleries and show people things and express myself through art, and that's my goal. And if people want to buy stuff, that's cool too. But people buying stuff isn't my primary aim. To be an artist. And well, one, we've developed this, things in our society where it is seen as pretentious to want to be an artist. You don't do that, so it's always a bit difficult to talk about. But also, if you do something, people say, well, you should sell it. But unfortunately, I am not in a position where I can just do art and not have to try and gain something back from it, because I am very, very low income. I can't afford to do art if I don't sell something, because I can't afford to buy the paper or the paints. It supplements my benefits. I'm on universal credit and it's not a lot. So I do actually need to supplement that with selling art. And just in case anybody's worried, it's the way I do art is in no way similar to what a normal job would be like. So I'm not doing this instead of doing a proper job. I do a few hours a week. That's about it. And it's well within the limits and rules of what universal credit like. But it is this awkward position where I kind of have to do that. And it can be really frustrating because you end up torn between, am I painting what I want to paint, or am I painting what people want to buy? And sometimes they're the same, sometimes those things align, sometimes they don't, and you just have to deal with that. And then obviously, again, further thorniness is that when you are selling art, even though people are very quick to say you should sell it and you should make money off that, when you then say, okay, please pay me a fair price, a lot of people go, oh no, I'm not going to pay you a fair price for that. I'm not going to pay you a living wage for that, or anything which reflects the time you put into it, or the skill, or the material cost. No, we wouldn't do that. It's just art. But you said I should sell it. No, yes, but we don't want to buy it. It's really hard. I am very left-wing. I am not a fan of capitalism at all. And yet I have to engage in it and say, well, okay, since I kind of have to engage in this, I am going to insist that you pay me fairly. And I'm going to be firm about this, because if you're going to insist that I'm going to partake in trade and the economy, then let's do this properly. And that's really difficult to do. I quite frequently will one day be really tough about it, and then the next day have a crisis of confidence and go, no, I can't do this. I'm not good enough. Nobody will buy it. I shouldn't be doing it. It's unethical, etc., etc. And I think it's something that needs to be talked about a lot more. And it is kind of being, but it's not, I don't think it's as open as it should be. And I don't think it's as sympathetic a conversation as it could be.
I have a lot of empathy with that, because in kind of the same way, when you get into costuming and making clothes, people are often like, oh, well, you should sell these, or you should take commissions, or you should do, in the same way, they're very rarely willing to pay the kind of prices that they'd actually have to. That conversation of, if you do that, you are not making the stuff that you want to make, because the stuff that you want to make is probably for you.
Yeah.
And so now there's this kind of weird conversation going on where a lot of people are like, well, we understand that you can sew as a job. That's a real job. And they go, okay, well, I'm going to sew my own costumes, and I'm going to put that on the internet, and I'm going to put it on Instagram, and I'm going to put it on YouTube, and I'm going to make money that way. And they go, no, that's not what we meant.
Yeah.
that's not a real job. What do you mean?
I think it is really interesting with things like Ko-fi and Patreon, that in some ways we've gone back to like the medieval through to Victorian age of having a patron. Except instead of having one wealthy patron, we now have a myriad of often quite poor patrons who want to support us. And it's really interesting that that's sort of come back again as the acceptable way to do arts is to have a patron. I was going to say to be patronized. That's very different.
Yeah.
It happens a lot, but it's also very different.
Yes. Like, I can remember kind of, we're talking years ago now, but when stuff like Patreon was just starting and people were weirdly against it. They were like, what do you mean? I'm not buying anything. I don't understand how this works. So why are you asking me for money? But I think people have really, in particular, people from the kind of like the demographics who really get on with the idea of mutual aid and supporting other people. Everyone's really got on board with the idea that, okay, a very small contribution on my part means that I get to continue to enjoy the stuff that you create, which makes my life better.
It's interesting, I think, and I mean, I don't want to get too deep into the socioeconomics, but there is a tendency as well that it is often lower income people. Not always, I mean, definitely not always, but there is, I think, an empathy often in people who have a bit less cash, that they're like, okay, no, if we can help somebody, we're going to do that, because we appreciate it so much when people do it for us, so we will also do it to other people, and we understand how much of a difference that makes, and we expect less in return for our investment. I think certainly sort of seeing wealthier people, when I'm saying wealthier people, I mean, like, I'm not talking like, okay, in my head, like somebody who earns £27,000 a year, I'm like, oh yes, they're comfortably off. No, when I'm talking wealthy, I mean like actual big numbers a year wealthy. And I think this happens in many industries and in retail and in service industries and stuff, that they tend to expect a lot more for their money. And they'll be like, okay, I'm paying for you, but what are you going to do? Well, no, you should produce a better video. You should produce more videos. Why aren't I getting a full transcript of this? Why aren't I getting printables, and like there's a lot more entitlement that comes with it. And it, you know, it's not exclusive. There's people of all income levels that are more or less entitled. But there's a trend. So yeah, like I said, it's interesting that we're going back to this idea of having patrons as artists, but that who those patrons are has shifted.
I mean, I for one welcome our new democratized income streams.
I'm all for it, and I'm very, very much in favor of arts for the masses as well. The idea that arts are no longer, and when I say art, I don't just mean painting and drawing, I mean costume making and music and sculpture and, you know, all sorts of things. And humanities too. Let's, you know, they always go together, arts and humanities. I have a friend, heavy metal scholar, heavy metal theologist, can't remember her patron name. She does small lectures basically and discussions about heavy metal and the Bible. And within that, there's a lot of sociology, there's a lot of feminist theory, there's a lot of disability theory, and it's absolutely fascinating. And it's really interesting whether whatever your religion or spiritual beliefs, it's really interesting in understanding how some of this is built and how this relates to our society, and doing that through the medium of heavy metal. So yeah, that's something that's on Patreon, and that's amazing, because where else could people access that sort of thing normally? You know, that sort of thing normally behind closed doors and in universities and restricted to people who can afford to be in those spaces. And now it's on Patreon, and like, if you can afford £5, great. You know, you can so, and yeah, the same goes for all sorts of arts and humanities. It's an amazing thing. It's very exciting, but weird nonetheless.
I definitely feel like one of the things that I feel like has changed over the past year, and hopefully will continue to do so, is that a lot of those kind of gate-kept communities, those you have to be this academic, this wealthy, this privileged to access this space and gain this art, this culture, this humanities, those spaces have suddenly lost their audience because they can't do things the traditional way anymore. And some of them have really struggled, and then some of them have opened up and gone, okay, if you have a stable internet connection and you can get on Discord, come and listen to this lecture, or wherever you are in the world, whoever you are, if you want in. And I also really like how, where that hasn't happened, other people have stepped up into that space and gone, okay, COVID last year was basically just a bunch of people kind of organically going, okay, well, we don't get the convention in Los Angeles that not everyone can afford to go to or be at. Let's do something else that we can do. And actually that reached such a huge and varied group of people. And the number of people who were like, I always dreamed of going to costume college. It was never going to happen. This is not the same, but it's kind of cool that we got something like that experience.
And I mean, the way they managed it as well, that they managed to get some of the social connection across as well, you know, and peer connection, because it wasn't just here's a series of instructional videos. There was discussions and the Discord channel, and it's created even like amongst people like you who are creating content, you know, you've formed connections with people you never would have spoken to otherwise. And like it's really impressive how they managed to get that feeling of community into it. And it not, because I've seen a few things where it's been great and they've sort of gone, okay, so we've put a series of lectures online and stuff, and you're like, yes, you're getting the informational content, and that's really interesting, and I'm glad to be able to get that, but I'm not sat in a room with other people who are all also enthusiastic about this, and that's important too. I'm so impressed with that whole endeavor. It's incredible. Exactly what we needed in the middle of the pandemic as well. We think is terrible. I'm going to watch a nice video of nice people telling me things.
Like, my involvement with it was very, very minor, but Noelle, who kind of masterminded the whole thing and put together the program and organized everyone, honestly needs some kind of award.
Gosh, yeah.
Or possibly, like, I was going to say more cats, but I think she has 6.
Maybe we can just send her pictures of cats. Some sort of costume canonization.
Yeah.
I'm always astounded by how much she takes on, because, I mean, the chronic illness aside, I am not I am not what does she say, A-type personality. I am not a leader. I am not the person who's going to go, I'm going to do all the things. So I just like watch people doing that. God, this is impressive. Terrifying, but impressive.
No, it was a good time. The internet is good. I'm glad of the internet. You know, there's a lot to miss. There's also a lot that has made lockdown bearable.
Definitely. But yeah, I'd be stuck without it. I mean, I think it's been very enlightening for people that they have gone, oh yeah, no, the internet makes life bearable, which is something that I think a lot of disabled people have been saying for a very long time. And when people are critical of internet usage or how much people spend on their computers or online and stuff, you're forgetting actually how it's being used and how it helps people connect and how it helps people learn and all the good things it does. And I think people are starting to understand that now, because they're in a situation where they can't go out as much, they can't see people, they can't do their normal activities. So actually, suddenly having Facebook open on my laptop all the time, I don't look at it all the time, but it's where my friends are. My friends are kept there, so I can go and say hello to them. It made me sound like a bit of a mad dragon, actually.
Friendship horde.
Come into my computer, friends. Yes, it's all safe for you here.
I'm not one of those people who's hugely active online. Hilariously, for someone who has a YouTube channel, but I like seeing what's going on with my friends. I'm not great at holding conversations over the internet. It's never been a thing I'm particularly into. Over the past year, with it being the only option, like obviously it's been hard, but at the same time, I definitely feel like I've realized that there were some people that I didn't speak to very often. Like I'd see people at events once or twice a year.
Yeah.
And the rest of the time I'd just be like, I'm sure they exist somewhere, doing their thing. And I think it's been good for me to remember that actually they are just there and I can talk to them and they're there the whole time. And I don't have to...
You learn sort of how valuable those infrequent relationships are. Like, okay, yeah, maybe I only see them 3 or 4 times a year at events. When that's taken away from you, oh no, that I looked forward to seeing them. I valued my time with these people. So let's find another way of doing it. And it's really hard to change what's instinctive, I think, in those sorts of... Not sure what I'm drawing here. Just putting lines on a page. It's getting a bit weird. Let's keep going.
Yeah.
There's mushrooms. This one's got mushrooms in.
Nice. I kind of like to talk about your work on Access LARP, which is a project of yours that has obviously been not terribly doing much for the past year, but is a great resource. And one day we will get to be in a field again.
It will be helpful. I started Access LARP a while ago now. Everything seems to be 4 or 5 years ago. I'm not sure if that's real or not, or that's just sort of the default time my brain puts on things when it's not sure. 4 or 5 years ago. So when I started LARPing, I wasn't chronically ill when I started LARPing, and I did not classify myself as disabled. In retrospect, I was, because I have EDS, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a lifelong condition. I frequently used a walking stick while I was at uni, and when I first started LARPing, sometimes I used a walking stick, but in my head I never connected that with like being disabled. It was just my knees are so bad I use a stick. And then I got Lyme disease at a LARP, and I got chronically ill from it. I ended up with, we call it post-Lyme disease syndrome. It's basically ME with extra bells and whistles. And I continued to LARP, and I found it incredibly difficult. I became disabled, and that opened my eyes to a whole world of disability activism, accessibility activism. And like, I'd never been callous towards the subject, but I wasn't heavily informed about it previous to that. So I learned a lot, and I learned quickly. And I learned the hard way as well, that not only is the world in general not accessible to disabled people. That is why people are disabled, because the world around them disables them. But my hobby was as well. I stopped going to LARP for a while because I could not do it. It was so exhausting and so painful to me. And there were there was big chunks of games, even if I did go to them, that I couldn't take part in because they were off limits to me. I couldn't go and run around the woods. I couldn't go hiking over a hill to go and find something. I couldn't be awake at any given moment. And if I wasn't awake at that moment, then tough luck, you've missed your opportunity. So yeah, I learned the hard way. And I started looking into it and learned a lot. I started out as a blog post. I just wanted to write ways to make your LARP more accessible. Gave a general list of different periods in LARP organizations. So from the conception of the idea, planning, at the event itself, all these different things. What goes into a LARP? How can you make it more accessible to people with disabilities? Keeping in mind that disabilities vary a lot, impairments vary a lot, and there is no one-size-fits-all solution. But what I really wanted to do was to encourage organisers to at least think about it and to at least try. Because even if it's not perfect, some is better than none. And if you do some, you'll find doing a bit more easier. And then you'll find doing a bit more even easier. And it was very, very popular. So I made it into a shareable PDF, basically, because people wanted to read it. And then I went, oh, I could share this with a wider audience. Can you hear small dogs barking in the background?
Is that what it is? There's a little bit of background noise.
Sorry about that. Yeah, the small dogs get very excited around here. But yeah, so I made it into a PDF, and then I thought, yeah, let's spread this wider. Let's make it into a thing. So I made a small website and I put the guide on so that people could find it. And then I wrote another guide, which was specifically about mental health and neurodivergence and how they can be disabling to people and the specific ways you might need to alter things to make your games more accessible. Carried on, I made some different guides about specific disabilities and specific impairments from the player point of view of this is a thing you can do as a player to make your game easier. So like, for example, for me, if I want to go to a game, I need to make sure I block off a good few days before the game and a good few days at least after the game where I don't do anything. I have nothing scheduled in those times. It's not always possible. But if I want to go to a game and not be horribly ill, I need to have that time blocked off. I need to make sure I communicate well with the organisers, because it's all well and good the organisers being willing to adapt and make accommodations, but they can only do that if I say to them, this is what I need. So, you know, I wanted to help the players as much as the organisers, because I discovered a lot of people weren't asking for help because they had been so accustomed to never having accommodations, to things never being accessible to them, and people turning down the chance to help as well, where, you know, if you say, can you do this because I'm disabled, people will just say it's not possible. And people have become so used to that they don't ask anymore, which is crap. It's sad, and it makes me really angry that people have learned this because they shouldn't have had to. So if I can get organisers on board with the fact that you can make changes and you can help your players, and then I can get the players on board with it's okay to ask for help. It is okay to ask because these organisers want to help you. But in order for that to be effective, this is how to go about it. It went really well. It's been very popular. A lot of people, they got to that exciting point where people I don't know use it. And I made everything free because my primary goal was for people to have this information. So everything was free to access. I blogged occasionally as well, focusing on particular individuals, particular games, aids that people have that help them. Then I kind of got very ill myself and had to stop doing it, because that is the irony of disabled people having to do work about disability, is that we are still disabled. So it's been on hiatus for a little while. Every so often I come back to it and then something goes wrong again. I've had a really rough couple of years, like pre-pandemic as well. So every time I've gone, this is the year I will do things with it, something happens.
Yeah.
But all the information is still there. All the information is still available to people, which is great. It's a shame I haven't added anything new to it. But on the other hand, the information people need is there and being used, and that's good. So,
and it's there for you to come back to when you're able.
When I'm able to. I've got some things to do about online LARP. Obviously, that's been really good in terms of access. I've been talking to Hazel, who is a very good LARP writer and organizer, and who is disabled herself, has written some really good things about making online LARP accessible. And I've got some which I can share as well. And I've got a couple of accounts from players who are disabled and have been doing online LARP. So I've got some things I would like to share. I just haven't been in a place physically or mentally where I've been able to work on that. This will be the year. I feel like I've jinxed it now. Something terrible is going to happen. Sorry, that's my fault, everyone.
I mean, let's be fair. 2021 kind of jinxed itself by
But you know, when Godzilla appears, that was my fault.
When Godzilla appears, honestly, it'll be an improvement. I'm really interested in, kind of assumed that I wasn't going to like online LARP because I find online conversations really challenging. And it's been really interesting to me because a lot of people have been like, oh yeah, we should just have online LARP. Online LARP is completely accessible. And I'm like, no.
Yeah.
It's don't get me wrong, it's good, but it's also got its own set of complications and things you need to think about.
It's got some of the same barriers which regular LARP does as well. You would think that I'd have done loads of online LARP because I don't have to physically travel to it. You know, that should be great for me. But I haven't, because you have to still be able to book them and plan ahead and remember things. I still can't do any of that. I'm still really bad at that. And if anything, sometimes online events are harder to do that for because they're less tangible. It's a thing which is happening in the ether. I don't have to physically get ready for it. So it's much harder to remember that I was going to book for a thing or that it's on this weekend and a lot of people do because you don't have to deal with a venue or a site. It's much easier for organisers to do things in quite short turnaround of going, we're going to run a LARP, it's going to be in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And my little disabled brain panics and goes, I can't plan ahead that far, help. And then I panic about it and then I completely forget. And then it's 2 weeks and people are playing it. And I'm like, oh no, I really wanted to play that. Damn it. So yeah, the swings and roundabouts, it's great. I don't have to go to a field. I just have to remember to book it.
I definitely feel like online LARP, while in some ways it's been really great. And one of the things I'm passionate about is getting new people into LARP because it's very insular. It's very hard to, if you're not already a LARPer, it's very hard to find out about LARP.
Even when you are a LARPer.
I know. Yeah, it's very, I don't want to say cliquey, but cliquey is what I mean.
I think there's some cliquiness to it, but I think, like I say, it's just insular. Even if it hasn't got that sour note that cliquiness has, it's still people who know people.
It's very down to who you know, and an assumption that everyone you need to reach is like at best two degrees removed from you on Facebook. And so I've been really pleased to see that there are people who are now setting up with a bit more of a initially like an internet reach to international LARPers, but also just more of a reach in general. But also I feel like because online LARP is so easy compared to writing a game, booking a site, trying to get players, dealing with lots of money, a whole bunch of people are now going, maybe I could run a LARP, but I'll just do it on Discord. And it'll have 10 people and I won't need to worry about anything other than the game that I've written. And it is really good how it's opened up to a whole new set of people that they can run LARPs, and hopefully a whole new set of people that this is maybe something that they could want to play in real life or just continue doing online.
It's a nice bridge between interactive theatre and like tabletop gaming and full on inner field or inner venue LARP, because you're going that step further and playing your character in full, which you don't do as much with tabletop games and interactive theatre. So you're getting that experience of becoming your character, playing your character, and completely being within the world of the game, which I think is something which people often do find intimidating and they're not sure if they can do it. So being able to do that in the safety of your own home is really good and really helpful. And often these are much shorter games as well, so you don't have to go, oh, can I stay in character for 3 days? And I think that's a nice, and hopefully that will give new players confidence of going, I enjoyed this, I enjoyed becoming my character, I enjoyed playing this role within this setting. I'd like to see if I can do more with that. Or, as is often the case, of I really liked doing this set behind a computer, but I wish I was wearing a costume.
It's very varied at the moment, like what's available. I don't want to say quality, because I feel quality of a LARP is subjective. Kind of how polished they are has been very, very varied, because almost all of this has been pulled together on a really, really short notice. Really pleased that people are starting to think LARP has existed for what, 20, 30 years?
Longer.
Online.
Oh, yeah. We're like 50 years now.
God.
It's the 21st century, Ash.
But 2000 was like a year ago, right? It was like 2 years ago.
No.
It was the 90s really recently.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, God.
Yeah, I have to just mentally add 20 years to all my assumptions of the past at the moment. I'm like, oh, yeah, it wasn't that long ago. It wasn't that long ago plus 20 years. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But yes, so LARP has been around for a long time, and people are still rolling into fields and not thinking about who's not getting in on these games, who are we inadvertently excluding, who is making sacrifices here that none of the other players are and that we aren't even aware of. And I'm really pleased that we're kind of less than a year in to online LARP suddenly being everyone's main thing, and people are going, okay, but we've got problems we need to be aware of, because these games aren't getting to everyone.
Recognizing that different styles of games don't suit everyone. It's sometimes a slightly controversial opinion, but I am okay with the fact that not every game is for every person. Sometimes that's down to genre. Sometimes that's down to like combat and things. You know, some people love having really combat heavy games. Some people hate them. So if a game is advertised as really combat heavy, don't book that game if you don't like it. I think we're seeing some of the same with the online LARPs of, this is a Discord heavy, we're using a lot of text type game. And then you're getting some which more like this, where they're more video chats. And it's like, well, some people, I struggle with the Discord type setup. I find that less accessible than this. Oh, what's it called? A sort of chat app. Other Room?
Oh, like Gather Town or
Gather Town, yeah.
Yeah,
that one.
You wander around and you can see video chat only for the people you're near.
Yes, and I found that amazing. Like that was really good for me. Whereas I know other people find that really awkward and off-putting. So you're going to get some of that where not every game is for every person, but the aim is to make that down to preferences and not ability or disability. But even then, we kind of have to, and we have to accept this sometimes as disabled people, that there are some things which don't suit us. And we ask organisers to do their best to provide as many alternatives as possible so that it is inclusive. But again, like going back to the idea of a combat heavy game, that I'm not going to do that because I can't. And it's a shame, but that game's not for me. But on the other hand, another game which isn't all about the combat, but which occasionally has combat, I want there to be a rule where I can just stab someone, like quietly stab someone.
Yeah.
And that way I get to do the stabby and have a weapon and be like, yeah, look at me, I'm a character with a weapon who stabs people. I get to play that sort of character. You know, it provides a balance. So there's things we have to look at when we're doing online LARP of like, does this format suit everyone? No, it doesn't. None of them are going to. None of them are going to be perfect. Let's find the one which suits most people. Look at why we're choosing the format we're looking at. Is it essential to the game we want to play that we use this format? If you have something which is really, like, I know some of the sci-fi games really make use of text on screens. If that is a core part of your game, and specifically the fact that it's text and there is no voice interaction, say with this computer or this other person, the fact that it is text, is that a core part of your game? If it's not, is there another way you can do it? If a player comes to you and says, I really struggle with this format, but I want to play your game, is there another way you can do it? Find another way. If it is a core part of your game, it absolutely has to be text because you want to look at the corruption of text or the way text is misinterpreted between people and, you know, things like that. If that's a really big theme, then okay, yeah, you stick with that. But maybe you look at ways at making it easier for the other player by saying, okay, we will do a private voice channel with you and read it out to you so you can hear it. Oh, look, yay, we've made it more accessible.
Yeah.
Sorry, I can ramble on about
please do.
hypothetical examples like all the time. I really like hypotheticals because it turns out that I might make them up as hypothetical, but actually there's going to be a player somewhere. There's going to be at least one player where they're like, yep, no, that works for me.
I definitely have found one of the few things that I kind of universally had bad experiences of in regular LARP was food. It is something that I discuss quite a lot. And so I had got quite good at having the conversations about food where I was going to the LARP organizers ahead of time and going, no, you need to give me a menu. And I'm going to tell you if I can't eat that food. And I have steeled myself to the point that I don't care if you get upset that I'm not eating your special menu that you've specially chosen. One of the ways that online LARP might have impacted people is that I'm suddenly finding, even as I generally consider myself a relatively abled person, not particularly disabled in any way by society or anything else, I'm going into online LARPs and going, okay, I'm consistently having similar problems, and I'm not yet at the point where I can like quantify those problems to something that I can then take to organizers in advance in the way that I can. I know what I'm asking about food, and I know what my position is on that. And so like hearing people talk through hypotheticals is actually really useful, because like you say, one person will be, actually, that's me, that works for me, that is a thing that I can ask for, that's a thing that I can suggest.
It's a really steep learning curve at the moment, because we are dealing with this is like really unknown territory for most of us. You know, online LARP is not a thing. It hasn't really been a thing before. There's been one or two, but now there's a lot, and we're all going, oh, what is this? How does this work? And like I said earlier, sometimes you don't ask because you don't know that you can ask. You don't ask because you don't know what it is you're asking for. You just know there's something, and learning those things does take time. It does take consideration. And you do want it to be a mutual thing as well. The aim is to have organizers thinking in advance and being ready to deal with these questions when they come up. But then you also need people to be able to ask the questions. So I could have sworn, I was just checking then, I could have sworn I'd written an Access LARP guide for costuming, but I can't find it. So now I'm wondering if I just thought about it. If I haven't, that's definitely, we should write one. That would be really cool. That can be my big comeback.
Yes.
Although, like, at the moment, it's not as big a deal because
no one's really doing costume.
Yeah, I mean, some people are because we get overexcited.
90% of when people are like, oh, we'd like you to come in costume. Even me, I'm like, ah, crap, right? If I got a jacket I can just throw
Yeah,
on?
it's like I'll put a hoodie on. I'll do big eyeliner.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I turned up to a game last week with a fake beard. I hadn't done an online game in ages. I haven't done a real life game since, like I said, this time last year. Nobody said you had to be wearing costume to play. I just decided I was going to dress up as a 1920s gent. So I did, and it was great fun. But yes, I had planned, I thought I'd written, but I can't find it, a guide to costuming, both from the perspective of organisers, because costume briefs and look and feel is important, but how do you do it in an accessible manner?
Yeah.
And also from the point of view of curing and making and putting together your own costumes and doing it in a way which doesn't physically break you or mentally break you, you know, which is accessible, essentially. We should do that. Or find it. One or the other. It'll appear at some point.
It has been really good to talk to you, given that the last time we talked in person was at a game that was about a global pandemic, before a global pandemic actually happened.
Thankfully, there's less blood this time.
Yeah, that was a blood-heavy game. Yeah, 100% less malevolent AIs in this reality, by which I mean not none, but fewer.
As far as we know, nobody's making deals with them.
I have my suspicions about the YouTube algorithm, but there you go.
Yeah, okay. Now I'm suspicious.
Do you want to tell people where they can find you online?
You can find me on Instagram at Skeleton Notes and on Facebook at Skeleton Notes. That's all one word. And also I have a Ko-fi account, which is, wait for it, Skeleton Notes, and on Etsy. Skeleton Notes. Look, I found a word and I stuck with it.
No, it's a consistent media image across multiple platforms. Is exactly what you should be doing. That's totally it, right?
Yeah,
that's my excuse.
It's how I planned it. Yep.
Awesome stuff. So thank you so much for being here and joining me on the channel. Yeah, I will put all of Robin's links into the description box below. Thank you so much for watching.
Thank you so much for having me chat at you.